And welcome to the Getting a Grip tennis podcast. Ben Thomas is I, and Merlin Davis is he, sits across me, or on my screen at least, thousands of miles away, back in sunny UK.
That's what happens when you're in Thailand.
It is, yeah. It's a struggle living out here, you know, in the 30-degree weather, sunshine every day.
Yeah, but you did just finish telling me about your food poisoning, so I'm not quite sure it's all as fun as you paint it to be.
Yeah, it's the yin and yang of life, isn't it, really? Got to take the ups with the downs. Anyway, yes, we are here to talk about tennis, of all things. We're basically going to round up kind of what's been going on in the tennis world recently, so in the last sort of week or two. Where best to start than Russia? Not in that way, but with...
I was going to say, careful with the intro on that one.
Daniil Medvedev, of course, that's what I'm referring to. He's
better.
recently claimed the number one spot in the tennis rankings. I think it's the first time that one of the big four has not been number one since February 2004. What are our thoughts on this? Is this going to be like a temporary thing, or do we think this could last for a few months or even longer than that? What's our feeling, especially with, you know, Djokovic being out of a couple of tournaments recently?
Well, the Djokovic saga is its own story, so I won't delve into that too much now, especially from the pandemic COVID perspective. But what I would say for Medvedev is he is a very special player. He emulates Djokovic in that same way where, you know, he's an all-round player. There's not necessarily a key weakness on his behalf. He moves well, and he is quite enjoyable to watch. He's a bit of a character, but sometimes those characters add to charisma, even if they're not necessarily charismatic. People seem to enjoy the fact that he's very about winning and very about his attitude on court. But like I say, he clearly puts in the time, he clearly works hard. When you're saying, will this last? I don't think Medvedev at number one will last, but I do think it's the end of the big four, to be quite honest. And I'll say the big four, as anyone who knows me will know, I'm a big Murray fan, and I will always believe that it's a big four and not a big three. But as you so rightly say, with the end of the big four, I think you're just going to see all these challengers coming through, and I think you're going to see a lot of different faces.
Yeah, I think. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like, age catches up with everyone, even the greatest players of all time. So, I mean, I think Nadal's at like number 5 or 6 in the world at the moment. Obviously, that's probably going to go up closer to, you know, maybe top 3. But they're not playing like the full schedules like they were in the past. Federer, of course, like he's been out injured for a while, and you're going to get guys like Medvedev and I was going to say Thiem, but then he's been out injured as well, I think. But Tsitsipas. Who else is there? Off the top of my head. Maybe Auger-Aliassime coming through. These guys are going to start pushing into those kind of top 5 places. So, yeah, I think obviously as a long-term kind of perspective, you're not going to see the big four monopolise those places, or even maybe the top 1 or 2 places. It's funny you say Medvedev is a bit meh about winning. It's funny to watch because when he's playing, he's like a super competitor when he's in and amongst it, and like, you often see him having a right go at the umpires, calling them corrupt and all that sort of stuff. It's probably not the smartest thing to
it's now one of my favorite clips from the tennis world. That scene of him at the Australian Open. Oh, yeah, that I could watch. That lives rent free in my head every day.
He is a meme, I think, in his own right. But I mean, I think he's going to win people over.
That's the personality he's going for. Call it acting. He is playing a role, and I think he loves it. And I think it all stems from the fact that he is a gamer as well as a tennis player.
True. Yeah, I think maybe he's going to be more liked than Djokovic because like, he kind of comes across as similar kind of in demeanor and kind of character. But I think maybe he's kind of aware of that, but he's trying to get audiences on side, maybe in a way that, I mean, Djokovic was kind of unlucky in the fact he basically came along when Rafa and Roger were like, that was the rivalry, you're either in one camp or the other one, and then there's this other guy coming in from the outside. It's like, no, we don't want anything to do with that. Whereas Medvedev is he's coming through in this new generation, so I think it's going to be easier for him to get crowds on side.
You say that, I think there's going to be a lot of, and I'm not going to go into why, clearly, but I think there'll be a lot of anti-Russia sentiment, and I do fear that he is going to pay a little bit of the price for that. Not because it's anything to do with him, nor is it his fault, obviously, but that is definitely going to play its part because there will be that Russian idea in the back of everyone's mind as a crowd. So, I mean, I hope that it won't impact him when he plays, but global politics affects us all. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's well, you don't want to use politics to kind of advance your own popularity, especially when you're a sporting figure. But I think it is an opportunity for him to actually get more people on side in kind of how he speaks about it. Obviously, you don't want to. He's not going to get into the details of the actual geopolitics, but in terms of just promoting, like anti-war sentiment or whatever, I think again that's probably a chance for him to at least, I don't know, show his human side a bit more.
Well, you've seen Andrei Rublev do exactly the same thing when he wrote on the camera, "No war, please." I think Medvedev would pay well to use that same card. The only issue is I don't think that the personality that he is going for particularly cares for global politics, nor his home country in that sense. So therefore, I feel that he probably won't play on that card when it might be in his interests to.
Yeah, well, he's. I mean, he did grow up in Russia, or at least in his very younger years. But I mean, he's travelled around a lot. I mean, as you do as a tennis player,
Yeah, anyone
it's
would.
not you're not going to stick around in Russia for like the entirety of the year. It's probably not the best thing for your tennis game. So I don't know how. I mean, I'm sure he feels connected to Russia, but as much as people who have lived there their whole lives, maybe not. And obviously, tennis is a global game as well. So yeah, I don't know. Anyway, moving on from trying to veer away from the politics as
Got to
such.
keep it light. Keep it light.
Yes, we have touched upon the traditional big four, if you can still call them that, and sort of about their kind of change in schedules, and obviously as they get older, they're not going to be able to play as many tournaments. In terms of Djokovic, should we start with him? He's obviously just recently split with his, I don't know, call him coach slash mentor, Marion Vida. I think they did split once before, like for a very short period of time. I think maybe 2017. But how do we kind of view that? Do we think, is this kind of Djokovic trying to go into like a final phase of his career with a different kind of outlook, or is there something deeper there? What do you think?
Um, it's an interesting perspective to take when you consider everything else going on in Djokovic's world, and I think everything that's happening with COVID, like vaccines and vaccine passports, the ability to play in these big tournaments, the ability to compete, the ability to hold on to the number one spot, which he has now obviously lost by not being able to compete. I think in many ways it might be a change in sentiment. I think Djokovic is realizing now that he will regardless now of whether he beats Nadal's record at this point, regardless of whether he beats these records and becomes the greatest player of all time, he will still be considered one of the greatest of all time, without a doubt. It's part of that. Well, in this regard, it's part of that big three mentality, which, as you know, is my pet peeve. But in this scenario, when you're talking about the goat, it is a big three at that point. The only
Mm.
problem is, I think that they have had a disagreement, perhaps, in Djokovic's focus on a tennis over his focus on everything else in his life. Maybe this is just me sort of rambling about perspective, and I think that potentially that sort of COVID aspect has played a role. And as you say, like it's coming into that maybe final stage of his career. Like that might not be the case though, because like I say, you see Federer and Nadal um, pursuing through the years. So when you can decide a player's final stages of their career are is completely warped these days. But yeah, I think that I think more than anything, I think it's a moral standpoint that may have led to this. And bear in mind, like not everyone wants to do the same thing for God knows how many years or their whole life, despite how successful it might be.
Yeah, it is interesting because when he did that brief interview with the BBC, which was kind of a bit weird because it was like It was just like a 3 or 4 minute thing where he was like, "I'm, I'm not actively anti-vaccination, but I'm not getting a vaccination." But yeah, he has positioned himself now where like his moral stance is above any of his kind of tennis objectives per se. Um,
Mm.
so yeah, I don't know if that fed into the relationship with his coaches around him. Maybe not. But it does kind of it does put him in an interesting position regarding his if he does have objectives. I'm sure he does to still be the number one or greatest of all time. Um, it's kind of going to be in tension with that. But actually, having said that, France now have removed the vaccine passport ruling, so it looks like he's going to have the green light at least to have a go at the French Open this year. So he could get back on level terms with Nadal. What do we think to that? Do we think what's his chances versus Nadal's, given that Nadal's had an incredible start to the year that no one really predicted?
This is again this is the nature of tennis these days, and I think the main culprit for the survivability of tennis players into the later years these days, like years that wouldn't have been considered about 10, 20 years ago for the age. I think the last person that made it to a really deep stage of their career was Radek Stepanek, and who was still able to scalp people quite consistently on the tour. But I think with Nadal and Djokovic, I'd be excessively excited about this because what you might see is one of the last great showdowns between the big four at the French Open. And if I was to bet, if I was a betting man when it came to tennis, which I'm often not because there's so many factors that it's hard to truly decide where to put your money. But I would say that the final, hopefully, if the draw goes well, the final will be the two of them, and it will be a classic.
Ooh. What about Sissipas though? He got to the final last year, and who we got? I don't know how Medvedev's going to fare on the clay. He has been improving in recent years, but it's hard to say. Yeah,
I
but
think I
yeah,
think we're going to see Nadal be truly truly dominant during this tournament. It's his tournament.
I mean, that's that's not a controversial statement at all, is it? Really, given that he's won 14 of I
It
don't know
should
the
be
last
renamed the
18.
Nadal Open. Let's face it.
I mean, I think at some point the trophy will be named after him. It's pretty obvious, isn't it?
Probably. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just probably. Yeah, I don't really know. Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Although I mean, Djokovic obviously did beat him there last year, but in terms of matches in the lead up to the tournament, it's going to be interesting to see what tournaments he is actually going to be able to participate in to get himself up to speed. Because you can do obviously you can do all the training you like, but it never,
Yeah.
as we know, it never replicates actually playing in competition and with the pressure on you. So
Match practice is everything. Match practice is everything. And I think the people you see this most greatly with are the people like Andy Murray, where he's trying to come back onto the tour. Um, he's not playing the same level of matches, just because he's not always going to make deep runs into a tournament, especially now. Again, another topic to discuss at another time. But you see that he struggles in certain scenarios because he's not playing as often and he's not able to compete as often. And again, this will happen with Djokovic as the champion that he is. He was recently defeated, in an earlier stage in a tournament than you would expect. What was it, Vesely? And
mm.
that's exactly the scenario that affects. So yeah, his main aim is to just play as much tennis as he possibly can now, and between now and then.
Yeah, these guys are. I mean, as robotic as they may seem, with their like insane level of consistency, which has kind of never been seen before. Really, they are still human, and tennis is very much a rhythmical kind of game. It's kind of
Oh
hard
yeah,
to explain unless you've played it, but it's very much like a feel based kind of sport. Obviously, you still have all the technical aspects of it, but until you kind of play it and you have to get into like a rhythm. Like it's the same if you take you're serving for example. That is like has a very rhythmical kind of action to it, and some days or some sets or whatever you may feel in rhythm, and then other times everything's kind of out of sync, and you try to put your finger on why it is, but yeah, ultimately playing and practicing, yeah, is the only way you're going to get back into that rhythm. And so yeah, even guys like Djokovic, They need that competitive practice, otherwise they're going to struggle. Right, are we ready? Here we go. It's time for a little bit of tennis trivia. So, five questions for you, Merlin, which I definitely haven't just found on a UK tabloid website. Okay, number 1. How many French Open singles titles has Rafael Nadal won? There you go. I'll start you off with an easy one. No pressure.
Titles. So that's 14.
It is 14. That is correct. Also my lucky number. Not that that has any significance.
Wow, you learn something new every day.
I know, really insightful information there. Question 2. Who was the youngest and first unseeded player to win the men's singles title at Wimbledon?
Ooh, interesting.
Think 80s/90s.
80s/90s.
He has coached one of the top players, at least for a short period of time.
Yeah. So I've got 2 people in mind. Who do I want to go with?
Time's running out.
I'm going to say Pete Sampras, but...
It's Boris Becker.
I knew it would be
Yeah.
the opposite.
The eccentric German. I think he was 17 when he won that first Wimbledon.
Come to think of it now, actually, has Pete Sampras actually coached anyone?
No, he's a bit
There's my
aloof, isn't he,
problem.
really? He's
Yeah.
sort of a mysterious character.
You gave me a clue and I didn't use it.
There you go. I tried to help you. I tried to make you look good. Okay, question 3. Novak Djokovic turned professional in which year? I mean, it's early kind of noughties time, just as a clue.
Well, you've narrowed it down to like 5 possible years there. It's 2001, wasn't it?
2003.
3.
So he would have been 15, maybe 16. I think. So if it was 2001, he would have been like 13, which would be some kind of record.
I'll tell you what, I lose track of players' ages these days, especially considering how long-lasting some of them are going.
Yeah. I think, Djokovic is like 34, 35 now, I think? Something like that.
Wow. In my head, he's still like 31 or 32, just like Murray.
Oh, those were the days.
Those were the days.
Question 4. Who has won the most Wimbledon women's singles titles? Again, this is sort of like a previous generation.
Previous generation.
She's also very good in the doubles as well.
Yeah, names on the tip of my mind. I've lost it. My head keeps screaming at me. It's one of the Williams sisters, but I know you're saying a previous generation, so it can't be.
Eastern European.
Eastern European. Oh, the names on the tip of my head, I can't remember. You're just going to have to tell me.
It is Martina Navratilova.
There we are, there we are.
I don't know how many she won, actually, but a little story for you. When I was at Wimbledon, I think for the first time, back in, it must have been like 05, 06 or something, I was outside centre court, and she came along and she patted me on the head.
Oh.
Yep. I was
How
like,
old were you at this point?
I don't know, it must have been like 7 or 8 maybe.
Cute.
I shouldn't know how old I was. No. I was just like, who is this woman who's like touching me on the head? This is very strange. And then I realised it was her. I was like, yeah, that's right.
And you never washed your head ever again?
No, it must have been at least a day till I washed it again.
Your parents wouldn't let you?
No. Question 5. Final question. So I think you've got...
I've got one. So far.
Yeah.
Yeah. My tennis knowledge currently is quite abysmal.
You're going to make the questions really difficult for me next time, aren't you?
Oh, you bet.
I thought these were reasonable. Anyway, question 5. Okay, this one is more difficult. At which hills was the US Open tennis tournament played before it moved to Flushing Meadows?
That is a great question.
I mean, it is America, so it's not going to be some kind of extravagant name. So just think very literally. So something Hills.
I'm going to go with Beverly Hills.
I would love it if that was the case. No, it's actually Forest Hills. Very imaginative
Forest
name.
Hills.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
That
mean,
sounds like a name.
Yeah. It's not a particularly memorable name, that, is it? But I didn't know
Hello,
that either.
my name's Forest Hills.
My name's Hill. Forest Hill.
Okay.
Right, that wraps up today's quiz and podcast. I forgot to say get a grip after each one, but I will do that next time.
Yeah. Well, that'll be next time. We know to do that in future.